A single click report to get what you want out of QuickBooks, the numbers exactly the way you need them as a business owner. That would be a miracle, especially if you could develop those reports fairly quickly. And it didn't cost a ton. So I knew at that moment that I could start an enterprise, but I couldn't keep being the Crystal Reports goddess. That's a great, cheeky, personal brand. That's not a scalable enterprise level brand. And so I actually hired someone to come up with a new name. And he came up with Datisfy out of our conversations and things that I'd said, and a tagline that says, do what counts.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today is going to be a terrific episode. Our guest is the founder of Datisfy, which is a company that helps business owners get custom reports for QuickBooks. She is called the Crystal Reports Goddess. Now, that's interesting. We're going to get into that in a bit. And I'm happy she is here today. Welcome to the show, Angela Meharg.
Oh, Michael Palmer, thank you so much for such a great welcome.
You are welcome, and thank you for being so generous with your time to join us on the podcast today. And we want to get right into it and get to know you a little bit. So tell us how you became the founder of Datisfy.
Well, as you said, I had come to be known in my industry as the Crystal Reports Goddess. Crystal Reports, many of you may know, that is a software application that connects to databases that allows you to pull information out of any database, any structured database. And I'd been working with it for a very long time, since 1996. And I'd come to a point in my career where, I kept getting hired as a contractor or a consultant, but I realized I could never reach my financial aims if I kept doing work for hire by the hour or even by project. I needed to scale something up. I needed to have an enterprise. And a friend of mine who's a CFO asked me if I could do a custom report, a split commission report for QuickBooks. I'm gonna just use that lingo because I know that bookkeepers would understand what I'm talking about. You are totally the audience who knows what I'm talking about. I said, well, QuickBooks, how hard can it be? I've been doing complex reports for systems like Oracle and SAP for years. How hard can it be? And I found out how hard it was. And I was a little bit stunned by how hard it was to get data out of QuickBooks. And I did it, but it cost me a lot more than I charged the customer, put it that way. But I learned something. And what I learned was I'm never going near QuickBooks again. And I wrote a blog post about it. And it turns out people search for things and they find you when you mention these things in a blog post. And people about 3 months later found me. They started to, about between 1 and 3 inquiries a week, begging me to do a custom report for QuickBooks. But knowing what I knew at that point, they couldn't really afford me because it was so complicated to get the data out. Until somebody said, hey, there's this software application you should check out. It's called QCube for QuickBooks. It's a data warehouse. It sucks the data out of QuickBooks. It improves its structure to make it easier to get at the data and makes many more fields and data items available, drops it into this separate data warehouse that stands alone. And that's what I'm like, when I saw it, instantly recognized an opportunity to build a true solution for this exact breakdown in the marketplace. A single click report to get what you want out of QuickBooks, the numbers exactly the way you need them as a business owner. That would be a miracle, especially if you could develop those reports fairly quickly. And it didn't cost a ton. So I knew at that moment that I could start an enterprise, but I couldn't keep being the Crystal Reports Goddess. That's a great, cheeky, personal brand. That's not a scalable enterprise level brand. And so I actually hired someone to come up with a new name. And he came up with Datisfy out of our conversations and things that I'd said. He came up with Datisfy and a tagline that says, do what counts. So both of those words, Datisfy is a made up word, but it says something. And I liked that very, very much. And so we settled on that and it was available. And the rest is history, which is now just about 3 years, in fact, focusing on this very niche problem when working with QuickBooks.
Beautiful. What a story. What an interesting evolution to your business journey. So with you growing your business, you work with probably anybody, business owners, entrepreneurs, bookkeepers, accountants, people that need to get this kind of data out of their QuickBooks. What has been your experience of working in the marketplace, and what have you seen from the launch?
There are a few things. One is that typically who contacts us is the business owner, the CEO or the CFO, which surprised me, but I guess that's typical in a smaller business, and that's who uses QuickBooks. I was also surprised at just how large those businesses can get, and they still use QuickBooks. So I've worked with companies that are, 5, 10, 20, 50, $100 million companies still using QuickBooks because it takes care of the basic needs. And the only thing that's missing for them and what they need is to be able to just get better reporting and analytics out of their own system without having to ditch the system. Because if you go to upgrade to a more advanced system like Lawson or one of the more advanced Sage ones or Microsoft Dynamics, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, first of all, just for the software and the implementation, the customization, the training, the business interruption, and then you're still going to need custom reports. Because every business runs a little bit differently and they need to see their numbers a little bit differently. And what has surprised me the most is, and we've done now hundreds of reports for different companies, different industries, only once have we been able to reuse a report that we built for a different customer in all this time. And that just tells you how unique every company is. And I like that because it makes it a challenge for us. We really have to listen to what the customer wants. But that's really, I think that's what people don't realize is so important about data analytics and running a company. You got to have your fingers on the pulse, and that's the pulse.
Beautiful. I absolutely love what you're saying, and I think there's a couple of things I wanted to pull out of that. In that, number one, business is not generic. If it was, everybody be doing it. It'd be easy. It'd just be like, turn on, hey, can I just start a business that's going to dump money in my bank account? Sure, just press this button. So it's not like that. It won't be that like that for a long time. So this whole conversation of automation, AI, and all of these interesting and exciting things, it's not necessarily going to remove the importance of people like yourself that actually can think critically and laterally and think about, okay, you're a business, you're unique. What information do you need? And let's help you get that information. And that really relates back to our listeners, right? Bookkeepers. And another level of that is your surprising discovery of entrepreneurs being the people who are contacting you. I mean, when I heard that, I'm like, yes, because that is what we are changing here at the Successful Bookkeeper podcast, is that the bookkeeper should be the one contacting you because they should be asking the entrepreneur saying, what is it that you need? What analytics do you need? What are you really trying to get to in your business? How can we help you with the information that we're collecting and making sure is accurate? How can we help you make better business decisions? And then going out and satisfying that by speaking to people like yourself. So I think it's exciting for our listeners to say, hey, I need to be thinking about this and being the person that is ahead of that entrepreneur and thinking about, well, how do I help them be more successful?
Oh, yeah. To have that kind of attitude in a bookkeeper would be amazing. In fact, I have a bit of that in the one that you referred to me, because I was having a real struggle finding a bookkeeper who could enter things, A, on a monthly basis for me, and B, just understand how to enter those. And I'm now, because of now I'm so closely related to this industry and to the data that goes into QuickBooks, all the transactions. I'm much more familiar with the lingo now, the jargon of the industry. And I actually am a member of a LinkedIn group called QuickBooks Tips and Tricks. And some of the best QuickBooks folks who are either they may be CPAs, they may be really advanced bookkeepers. There are tons of discussions about how to do things the right way. And it took me a very long time to find a bookkeeper who could do it the right way. And first, thanks for that recommendation. I don't know if I should mention her name.
Absolutely, can mention her name. We're proud. We are proud to salute the great bookkeepers out there, Siobhan Harrop Scott, and she will definitely be a guest on our show. And she's one of our wonderful clients with Pure Bookkeeping, and she's just got a really switched on business and is growing like a weed. So we're going to have her on, and it was really easy for me to refer to you based on where you were and what you needed, and we've got handfuls of great bookkeepers across the country, but you're right here in Toronto, and Siobhan was there, and wow, what a beautiful connection. So it's my pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks for that.
Yeah. And so excited that I'm hearing that feedback, and it's great. And Siobhan will listen to this podcast and have a big smile on her face as well. Yeah. So this is so cool. I love that insight that you gained from your business journey. And I want to make sure and I think the listeners probably realize you're not a bookkeeper, but you're a person who understands data and understands the structure of data and how to move it around and pull it from this place to that place and put it where it needs to be to get information out of it. Mm-hmm. So,
in fact, just if I may, we have a new project that just kicked off last week. It's a construction company in Calgary, and they wanted some job cost analysis reports, just one actually, because they spend a lot of time getting the data out of QuickBooks into Excel and then putting it into this other spreadsheet. I'm like, wow, you don't have time for this nonsense. And they have like hundreds of projects to deal with, not all at the same time, but managing them in Excel is, oh my gosh, so not the way to go. But the other complication of it is that they use an additional system to manage all the estimating. It's called QuickBid. So we're going to actually combine the two into a single report, so nobody ever has to touch Excel again. So talk about different systems and pulling them together. That's a perfect example.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. So what would you say for the bookkeepers in terms of them being able to start these conversations with the owners, the people they serve? How do you see that going?
Well, first of all, just asking a question like that is a great place to start, because I would imagine that the business owners aren't accustomed to receiving a question like that from a bookkeeper. I think also understanding, doing a little research, a little background gathering on the industry that particular customer is in, and finding out what are the things that are typically measured in that industry. And of course, you may not have access to all of the systems, and your focus would be on the financial system. But to find out what things are measured, what are the typical ratios? Like restaurant industries run on different ratios than other industries. Food and beverage costs, as opposed to measured to the sale of the food, measures the cost of the goods sold. That's not a typical ratio, obviously, in other industries. So get familiar with what are those kinds of calculations, percentages. And then a lot of business owners tend not to think in the numbers so much. A lot of people avoid the numbers. And a different way of asking them is, what's the question you always want the answer to but can never seem to find about your business?
That's a beautiful question. That's a beautiful question. We need to say that about 10 times, perhaps.
I know. So like asking them, what's the thing you always want to ask? And you don't know, who to ask or where the information is, but you'd really like to have that on a regular or recurring basis so you could manage something. Because if you can't see it, you can't manage it. You can't direct it.
It's a beautiful question. It's a great question. And I think it's a tough question for people that find themselves doing the work as a bookkeeper, in that they are very black and white. They're trying to put things into perfection, and that behavior, that characteristic in itself could be, you don't want to ask a question that you might not know the answer to. And so part of this, I think, is an invitation that both of us, you and I, are actually going to make of our listeners, is to give yourself permission to not have the answer to these types of questions and be okay with that. And that's where you'll get to opportunities and new relationships with these owners, is by asking a question, just like Angela asked, is that we don't know. Their problem could be something that you would never, ever be able to solve for them. But the fact that you've asked it is going to improve the relationship with them.
Can I tell you another question?
Beautiful. Let's do it.
I don't think this is strictly a QuickBooks thing. I think it just happens to be very much a thing with QuickBooks, but I suspect this is a thing with other systems as well, is where are people exporting stuff to Excel and managing stuff in Excel instead of in the systems? Now, the business owner may not know the answer to that, but it's a worthy sort of investigation, because there's this data living in spreadsheets all over the organization. Even if it's a small organization, those are called data silos. A, it's not secure. And B, you can't do anything with that data except in the form that it's in. So it doesn't lead to great analytics and decision making. So I think that's a really good question to ask, is where are things being exported out of the system and manipulated and played with and stored elsewhere?
It's great. And it's also sort of brings up in my mind, it's the owner. It's like, what question are they trying to find the answer to but can't seem to find it? But as well, if they are a larger organization, do they have other people in their organization that report to them that are trying to answer questions too, to answer the question for the leader? It's like kind of like this hierarchy of, hey, we can't find an answer. You go find it. I don't know. Where are you going to find it? Right down to the bottom of the people front lines, right? So that's, it's kind of thinking not just the owner, but where else are these people trying to answer these questions, and these Excel spreadsheets hanging out and inputs and outputs. And Angela, I would have to think that the work you do brings a level of consistency to analytics, and as well helps businesses scale.
Yes. Consistency. The same old expression, garbage in, garbage out, applies just as much to financial transactions as to anything. And you just said that bookkeepers tend to relate to things as very black and white, because a transaction is a transaction. It's an input or an output, right? It's a credit or a debit. It has to be one of those things. So I can really appreciate where the black and white view is important. You need to have that objectivity. What surprised me about accounting, which is not the same thing as bookkeeping, I've come to learn, is that accounting is just as much an art as it is a science or a mathematical thing. And learning how to and where to allocate things can be very subjective. And having an understanding of that as a bookkeeper would probably be useful too, so that you know what questions to ask depending on your customer's aims. And it's not, I'm not saying do anything illegal. This is all very legal. It's like, but where are you going to allocate that to? And it tends to be in the bigger organizations, but that they can move things around a little bit more. But I think that's a valid and very valuable thing that a bookkeeper's understanding could bring. Did you even ask that question? I can't even remember what question you asked.
We telepathically had that conversation, and it happened because it's bang on, and it's very interesting conversation that we don't have probably enough, which is, if we think of any team or function, right, every system has different pieces and parts that have to make it all work. And all of those pieces and parts are extremely important. You pull one away, and it no longer works, right? If you take the spokes out of the wheel, we got problems, okay? But the thing to do is to make sure that you're in collaboration with the other parts and pieces. So with the bookkeeper, that traditionally would be putting them all of those things in the places that they need to be, needs to have an appreciation for what the accountant's doing, have an appreciation for where the entrepreneur is and what they need, and the struggles and understanding of what's happening in the system and process, right? So it's just knowing your job extremely well. My dad used to always say, always know your job and everyone that you work with, their job as best you can so that you are a valuable asset to everyone and yourself. And so it's a very similar concept. It's know your job, know what you're really great at, what you're doing, but also understand what it is that they're doing, an appreciation of what they're doing so that you can be a contributor to what they're doing. And I think that was the essence that I got from your comment. And I think it's extremely valuable.
I just thought of something that we've come up against a couple of times that I'd really love to bring up here. And it does have to do with entering things accurately and in a meaningful way. We have a customer in Oakville. We've just done some custom profit and loss statements for them. And we did them and they worked until they started running it for the new fiscal year, the new calendar year. And they're like, well, the numbers aren't working. I'm like, well, let's have a look. And what we discovered was this person who I'm working with now is new. He's taken over the role from another person. And what that other person had done in the past, she didn't enter things on a monthly, timely basis. She did GL entries later to catch things up. And so the dates never fell into the periods where the expense or the transaction actually occurred. And so the monthly reports would never reflect things. So now this guy has to take what we've done for him because the new stuff is accurate, the current year is accurate, but he has to go and kind of fix the numbers manually every month until this year is over, until they have a full, complete year to look back on. I'm like, please don't ever do that. If I was ever going to ask anything of bookkeepers, please don't do the shortcut. It doesn't serve anyone in the long run because what you enter is really critical, valuable data that decisions get made on, and a GL entry just doesn't cut it. My previous bookkeeper was entering my credit card statements as GL entries, and I didn't know that until I tried to do reporting on it. And of course, it's not there. The data just doesn't exist in the same way. So just know that the data, the transactions that get entered, they lead to something else, and they're really valuable, and they're kind of like gold. And you got to mine that gold, but it's got to be there to mine in the first place. So if I was ever to have a wish for a ways for bookkeepers to think of what they do, and I know many of you do. Of course, that's kind of why you like what you do. You love to check things off and do them right. But it's the shortcuts that get us all into trouble. So I hope you don't mind. I've just said that and shared that. But that would be my dream request of bookkeepers in the world.
I think Debbie, my partner in Australia, Debbie Roberts, who's the co-author of E-Myth Bookkeeper, would be smiling down there in Australia in terms of, doing it right and having a process and system in place to make sure that it can be done right, because it doesn't serve anybody to not do it right. And this goes back to what we were talking about in terms of knowing where we're going. Okay. It's like, this data is important. We need it for reporting. If the bookkeeper had understood what answers the owner was trying to get to, and had that acumen to know, hey, we better do it this way, otherwise there's going to be problems. So understand where everybody's trying to get to. When you do that, you become the valuable asset in the whole process in the system, and you're considered a valuable player on the team. And those players typically stay longer. They typically get paid more. And they typically have a lot more fun being there.
Having said that, I'm going to make a recommendation. Is my sense is most bookkeepers have a sort of a producer kind of personality. Like you like to get things done, check them off the list, do them right, kind of you're a get things done kind of person. And that kind of personality tends not to make the owners or the people in charge aware of the good work that you've done. So, and maybe against your general kind of approach in life, but keep a track of the good things that you do for that customer in a way that you can share with them so that they understand your value. Because if you don't, it just becomes something they can take for granted. And you need to make sure they know what it is that you do for them.
It's gold, Angela. And I'm a bit of a producer as well. I'll just go and do things and I won't tell anybody about it. I just get it done and it just all works out. And if the opinions of others, if I worked for somebody else, it's not a good thing. You need to, it's like, hey, what do you do around here? It's like, well, I do a lot of things around here, right? You don't want that question being asked. And so it is a bit of self-promotion, self-marketing, and it's very important. I'm glad you brought it up. And we're tackling getting some gold here in terms of this conversation for where people can think. How do you think bookkeepers can do this?
Well, I think making a list of where you've kind of gone above and beyond normal data entry, where you've had to really investigate something, keeping track of that on a monthly basis, and then sending just an email. It doesn't have to be in person. Just say, I just wanted you to know that here's what we've accomplished this month. Yep, we entered the data, but here's what we resolved. Here's this question, this puzzle that we, dug into, and here's how it affects you. That's pretty simple, but I've never received anything quite like that from a bookkeeper, but I do that kind of thing as a consultant because it's a more consultative kind of thing to do. But if you think of yourself in that kind of as a consultant in a role like that, then your customer does tend to think, wow, that's something I'm glad I paid for that. I'm glad I exchanged my resources for that kind of help.
I love that. I think that's something every single listener can take on, is just bringing people up to speed as to what's going on, where you're at. And probably there's a hesitancy because bookkeepers get behind, right? There's data, things to catch up. And listen, they're not the entrepreneurs are not the innocent ones here either. They cause a lot of problems in terms of getting things back and understanding where it's all going. So they've got a rough job in many cases of keeping the business owner and the business systems moving forward. But yet don't let that get in your way, even though it's going to get in your way. Listen to what Angela's saying, and literally, if you're behind, just let them know. We're behind. We're getting you caught up. We're doing it right. It's important to do it this way. Otherwise, dip, just like we've talked about. Understand where they want to get to so that you can say, I know we're trying to get you here, and here's where we are. That is valuable.
Well, not only that, if you see there's a recurring pattern to the way the data comes to you, the transactions, the receipts, the invoices, whatever it is, and you can see what the source of that is. Maybe it's an individual, maybe it's a missing system, maybe it's just somebody hates numbers and they just don't bother because they don't get it. Find out if there's a way to automate that so that they don't have to work so hard, so they don't have to labor to get you what you need.
Help themselves by improving the system and process that they have going on. And that's a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is business systems and the E-Myth Bookkeeper. If you haven't read that book yet, listener, it's an excellent book around building a system-dependent business and how to make a small business work and how to make it profitable without pulling your hair out. Because when you just like Angela's saying, it's like you've identified something's not working. The key is to fix it and put a measure in place or a system in place to ensure that it doesn't break again and that it's efficient, that it's some way efficient. And we're lucky living in this day and age in terms of all the apps and technology and things that are happening that can help us take care of these small little bits and pieces that then allows us to send out emails like you've just talked about or have conversations that we talked about in terms of understanding where the owner's going.
Mm-hmm. Looks like I'm going to have to read that book too.
Well, you absolutely, definitely, most definitely should. It'll be, we'll send you a copy. How about that? Angela, this has been great. We've gone off, and like we said, before we had this conversation, I said, we've got a roadmap, but I'm an off-road vehicle, so we may leave the road and take some journeys. And wow, what a great conversation this has been to get off the beaten track and talk about your business and what you see for our listeners, and just absolute gold that we've gotten today.
Well, totally a pleasure, Michael. It's great to talk to you as always.
Absolutely. And now, Angela, let everybody know how they can get in touch with you, learn more about you, and get some of the great work that you're doing over at your organization.
Oh, great. So it's really easy to find me and Datisfy. Datisfy is like satisfy with a D, satisfied with your data. I know, clever play on words.
I love it.
You can you can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us at datisfy.com, and you can email me at angela@datisfy.com. We work exclusively with QuickBooks Desktop. So obviously it's not a fit if your customers don't use that. But if they do, then chances are we can provide some really valuable help. And the other thing is because we specialize in reporting for QuickBooks, and that is all we do, we get in and out really fast, but we leave a lot of value in our wake. And it's something that you don't have to learn how to do. And because specialization is really where your profitability is going to lay.
Either one works for me.
Yeah, let the specialist deliver their specialty, and you focus on what you do the best, and then everybody wins. That's my view.
Beautiful. Awesome. I completely enjoyed this conversation, and I think our listeners are going to be coming to your website and getting in touch with you and having conversations and connecting with you on, I invite you to join the Successful Bookkeeper Facebook private group, where you can help answer some of those questions. I love that you're so specialized in a specific part of the business. It enables you to be awesome at it, and I think you're a valuable asset to the community. So it's been great having you, and until next time, we'll keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much, Michael. All the best.
You bet. That wraps another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast, and what an episode it was. Tons of gold. To learn more about today's guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.